Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, at first glance, it might seem like just another regional peace agreement in Central Africa. But as we start to pull back the layers, you see it pretty quickly reveals itself as really a masterclass in global resource warfare.
Yeah, it's high-stakes stuff.
A geopolitical chess match, you know, for trillions of dollars and truly the future of global technology. These recent headlines about a peace deal between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda,
Right.
they're just the tip of a very, very complex iceberg.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how this global scramble for critical resources is fundamentally reshaping our world. It's making these previously sort of peripheral, resource-rich African nations absolutely pivotal. Central, really.
Right on the main stage now.
Exactly. This isn't simply another localized African conflict. It's about strategic leverage. It's about control over vital supply chains. And ultimately, it's about who dictates the pace, you know, the direction of the 21st century. It's a profound shift.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that immediate headline then. This peace agreement between Rwanda and the DRC, foreign ministers reportedly signed something, June 27th?
That's right.
Pledging to implement a 2024 deal. And the idea is Rwandan troops withdraw from eastern Congo within 90 days. On the surface, that sounds like progress. A win for stability, maybe. But you're saying this agreement holds a hidden detail, something more complicated.
Indeed, and it's critical. This agreement, which actually goes back to March 2023, is, yes, rooted in the aftermath of the tragic 1994 Rwandan genocide, and it purports to end decades of simmering conflict.
Okay.
However, here's the crucial fact, often overlooked.
Yeah.
The most formidable rebel group, M23, they haven't signed on. They're not on board this ceasefire.
And M23, they're not just some small group.
Not at all. They're largely an ethnic Tutsi group, reemerged in strength back in 2021. They effectively act as a proxy force in this conflict.
Okay.
And they seized key strategic towns, places like Buna, Goma, Ruru by late 2022, critically disrupting stability and, crucially, mineral supply routes.
So they control important ground.
Exactly. And the DRC government directly blames Rwanda for backing M23. Which isn't just an accusation, by the way. Now, it's backed by multiple UN reports, U.S. intelligence assessments. Now, Qatar is reportedly working behind the scenes trying to get M23 involved.
Okay.
But as of right now, their participation, it remains elusive, which means any peace deal without M23 is, well, it's incomplete at best. Maybe symbolic.
So we have this fragile peace deal, this really powerful rebel group not even at the table yet. Given all that, why is this particular deal, this specific region, so incredibly important on a global scale? What's the real prize here, beyond just, regional stability?
It's all about what lies beneath the soil, under those dense forests of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Exactly. We're talking about a mineral treasure trove that is quite literally foundational to modern technology, the global economy even. This isn't about charity. It's not simply peacekeeping. It's about these deep reserves of materials that power everything. Everything from your smartphone to advanced military defense systems.
Give us some numbers then, because I think the scale of this is often just hard to grasp. What exactly are we talking about?
Okay, numbers. The DRC produces over 13% of the world's copper, about 17% of industrial diamonds, an astonishing 45% of global tantalum, sometimes misspelled, but tantalum,
Right.
and a staggering 74% of global cobalt.
74%, just from the DRC.
And specifically on cobalt.
Yeah.
The DRC holds over 70% of the world's known cobalt reserves. This metal is absolutely essential for the lithium-ion batteries.
The ones in EVs, phones.
Exactly. Electric vehicles, your smartphone, and critically modern military systems. Every time you scroll through your phone or you see an EV drive by, you're interacting with tech that fundamentally relies on Congolese cobalt.
Just to put that in perspective, I saw a figure that each smartphone battery uses about 8 grams of cobalt.
Seems about right.
And in 2022 alone, mobile phones consumed almost 10% of all cobalt produced that year. It's just baked into everything. And you mentioned tantalum. What makes that one so vital? You said AI chips, missile systems.
Yeah, tantalum's incredibly special. Its unique properties are heat resistance and its ability to form really compact, high-capacity components.
So you can make things smaller.
Precisely. Think about missile guidance systems where every gram, every millimeter matters, or advanced AI processors running hot, needing to stay cool. High-performance military aircraft space and weight are absolute premiums.
Right.
Tantalum lets engineers create incredibly powerful yet tiny capacitors and resistors. It's a cornerstone of that high-performance, cutting-edge electronics world.
Okay, so the DRC has these incredible raw materials, indispensable, really, for the tech future. But here's the crucial question, isn't it? If the DRC has all the raw stuff, who's actually processing it, turning it into the refined minerals that go into our products? Because that's where the real value add happens, right?
Exactly right. And this is the point that often gets glossed over. While the DRC produces the vast majority of the raw cobalt ore, it produces virtually none of the world's refined cobalt.
Wow, none.
Practically none. That refined material, the stuff that actually makes the batteries work, a full 76% of it is made in China.
76%.
Followed by a very distant Finland at about 10%. And think about global demand for cobalt, projected to quadruple by 2030.
Quadruple.
Driven by green tech, definitely. EVs, but increasingly defense sectors, AI, advanced computing. It means whoever controls those mines and the processing chain.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. They truly control the future of technology.
That's a stark reality. And when we talk about resource warfare, it's not just about digging stuff up. It's owning that entire value chain. And it's fascinating how the narrative around these deals shifts, depending on who's signing them.
Oh, completely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the framing is remarkably telling. Just consider this. Back in 2008, China signed a deal for these minerals, about $9 billion.
Okay.
Western media widely called it Chinese colonization, neocolonialism, dire warnings about debt traps, exploitation.
I remember that rhetoric,
Now, fast forward. A deal reportedly signed for an estimated $2 trillion.
$2 trillion.
Around 200 times larger. And suddenly, under a different administration, it's termed national security and stability.
Quite the contrast.
It just highlights these starkly differing perspectives, doesn't it? On what's legitimate, what's acceptable engagement. Depends entirely on who the actor is and their perceived geopolitical interests. It's a masterclass in narrative control, really.
It certainly seems that way. For decades, the U.S. has been this hyperpower, but Africa maybe hasn't always been a sustained strategic focus, especially for these long-term raw material plays. So how did China manage to get such a strong, really dominant foothold in a region so vital? It feels like they were playing chess while maybe the U.S. was playing checkers or focused elsewhere.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. During the Cold War, yes, the U.S. did invest heavily to counter Soviet influence, particularly in Congo, then Zaire, under Mobutu.
Right, the U.S. proxy.
He was key.
Yeah.
Installed to contain communism there. But after the Soviet Union dissolved and then the Mobutu regime finally collapsed in 1997, U.S. interest just evaporated almost.
Really?
Dramatically. Resources were quickly diverted. Other wars, other priorities, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Africa strategically just dropped way down the list.
And China stepped in.
China was playing a remarkably long and patient game, executing this comprehensive, multifaceted strategy. By the early 2000s, Chinese mining companies quietly started buying small stakes. Copper, cobalt mines.
Just testing the waters.
Perhaps. But it didn't stay small for long. Since 2015, Chinese firms have poured over $10 billion into the DRC's mining sector alone.
$10 billion.
Today, major players Zijin Mining, China Nonferrous, Huayu Cobalt, they control something like 15 of Congo's 19 major cobalt projects.
15 out of 19? Why?
And it's not just extraction. Over 60% of DRC's cobalt exports go straight to China. And critically, as we said, they don't just mine it.
They process them.
They own and operate the entire processing chain, from raw ore to refined metal. That gives them near monopoly control. Not just cobalt, but tantalum exports too. It's truly vertical dominance, something few other nations have managed.
So this isn't just about grabbing raw materials then. It sounds much bigger, like building an entire ecosystem. What does this deep entrenchment, their whole Africa strategy, what does that translate to in terms of, geopolitical leverage for Beijing?
Well, for China, Congo is far more than just a mine. It's absolutely integral to a comprehensive Africa strategy. It covers trade, raw materials, yes, but also infrastructure development, and crucially, long-term soft power.
Soft power, too.
Definitely. This multi-pronged approach helps China directly undercut U.S. and EU dominance in these critical supply chains. And it helps them fundamentally shape the next era of global infrastructure, battery technology. They're investing in ports, railways, power plants across the continent, directly linking resource extraction to wider economic and strategic influence.
Building the whole network.
Exactly. By 2009, China had already become Africa's top infrastructure and investment partner. Trade hit over $282 billion in 2023. This is sustained, decades-long commitment.
And the U.S. engagement.
Well, consider the contrast. June 2025, President Xi Jinping holds a major summit with African leaders, signing declarations, deepening cooperation, new areas like AI, digital finance, green energy partnerships. Just in April, China announced removing all tariffs on exports from 53 African nations. Compare that. Well, the FOCAC summit, the China-Africa Forum, pledged $50 billion in financing for 2025-27. It started in 2000, held every 3 years. Consistent engagement.
And the U.S. side?
The most recent U.S. presidential summit with African leaders. Biden, December 2022. Before that, Obama, 2014. It highlights a pattern, perhaps, of more sporadic, high-level attention compared to China's very regular, institutionalized engagement.
That sustained engagement really paints a clear picture. Okay, let's pivot back to Donald Trump's involvement in this specific DRC-Rwanda peace deal. If China's been playing this long game, what's the U.S. approach here, this more transactional style? Is it really about bringing peace, or is there a more strategic, maybe even cynical motive playing out?
Look, the reporting suggests this peace push. It isn't really about peace in the traditional sense, not primarily.
What is it about then?
It seems to be about building a U.S.-controlled corridor for cobalt and tantalum, leveraging private security contracts, supply chain logistics, stretching into East Africa, the Indian Ocean.
So securing the routes.
Exactly. It looks like resource warfare, carried out through backdoor diplomacy, aiming to cut into China's established dominance. The talk of a Nobel Peace Prize. That feels like a sideshow. A narrative dressing for something far more strategic, economic, and security-focused.
So this peace push isn't just diplomatic talk, it's potentially a blueprint for a new kind of supply chain security, maybe bypassing traditional military stuff. How would these private security contracts work? Is that a new way to control resources?
It absolutely looks like a different paradigm. Instead of deploying large numbers of, say, U.S. troops, which could be politically tricky, expensive, the strategy seems to involve using private military and security contractors, PMSCs. These groups can provide armed protection for mines, secure the transport routes, maybe even train local forces loyal to this new framework.
More flexible.
Very flexible. Deniable, potentially much more efficient. It's a way to secure physical control over the mines, the logistics for the raw materials, without the formal baggage or political blowback of a direct military footprint. It's a nimble way to secure assets in, let's face it, pretty volatile regions.
That's really fascinating. Because as you said, the traditional U.S. problem has maybe been that lack of sustained focus in Africa, often short-term interventions or aid. This feels different, like cutting right to the chase. Make a deal, secure the assets. Our sources suggest this administration reportedly respects strong leaders, like Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who's seen as unapologetically strategic and also, as was noted, likes dollars. Maybe he sees this transactional approach as faster, less red tape, less moralizing perhaps than traditional diplomacy.
And this brings us right back to that really important question about Rwanda's actual incentive for peace, real lasting peace.
Okay.
Because despite having limited natural resources itself, Rwanda exports hundreds of millions of dollars worth of tantalum, tin, gold, tungsten.
Right, but where does it get them?
And guess where most of that originates? It's largely smuggled. Smuggled from conflict zones in eastern Congo. Kagame's government has strategically invested heavily in mineral refineries, logistics infrastructure that explicitly depend on this flow of Congolese ore, much of it illicit.
So if real peace broke out,
if peace were fully implemented, if Kinshasa regained full, undisputed control over those mining routes, those exports, Rwanda would stand to lose a major source of revenue and significant geopolitical leverage. This isn't trivial for their economy.
That is. Well, a cynical view, but maybe a realistic one. So this idea of managed instability, keeping things simmering but not boiling over, what does that actually look like for the people living there in those mineral-rich but conflict-ridden zones? And what are the long-term costs?
On the ground, managed instability means, frankly, a perpetuation of human suffering. It looks like continued displacement, localized violence, exploitation of labor, sometimes horrific conditions, a constant state of insecurity that just prevents any genuine development. For the people living there, their land's incredible wealth becomes a curse, fueling militias, enriching external actors while they get nothing.
And long-term?
Long-term, the consequences are devastating. You get a deeply entrenched, illicit economy, perpetual cycles of conflict that just gut governance make institution building impossible, and a population that understandably loses faith in any prospect of real peace, real prosperity. It keeps the region fragmented, easier to exploit, and less able to assert its own sovereignty over its own riches. It's an environment where, The strong, opportunistic players thrive, and the local population pays the heaviest price. Always.
And finally, let's bring this back home. What does this whole high-stakes play, the peace deals, the trillions in minerals, the U.S. versus China angle, what does it mean for the domestic political landscape back in the U.S.? How might this get spun, presented to the American public?
Oh, this whole scenario is, without a doubt, pure campaign gold. For the president, for his supporters.
How so?
He gets to say, look, I stopped a war the previous administration ignored, or I beat China without firing a shot, and I reopened Africa for American industry. It's a narrative that plays well to multiple groups.
Right.
Evangelicals might see him supporting Christians in Rwanda. National security types, strategists might appreciate him, reasserting U.S. global relevance, securing critical supply chains, at least rhetorically.
But the actual impact?
Well, the practical chances are that the true impact of those mineral rights, it might remain more of a rhetorical gimmick for the average American, used more for powerful domestic messaging, foreign policy posturing, than for actual widespread industrial benefit back home, certainly in the short term.
So more talk than immediate jobs or lower prices.
The long-term strategic play could be significant, absolutely. But the immediate economic trickle-down for the average person, likely minimal, making it primarily a very useful political talking point.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. This recent, really complex peace deal, the almost unfathomable mineral wealth of the DRC, China's deep, long-term strategic investments, and now this new, more transactional U.S. push for critical resources. It's clear this isn't just some localized conflict. It's a profound global competition playing out right in the heart of Africa, directly tied to the stuff that powers our whole world.
Yeah, what really stands out to me most is just how this relentless quest for essential minerals, the stuff powering our everyday devices, the future of tech, how it can so dramatically reshape global alliances, drive these incredibly complex diplomatic moves, even influence the very nature of conflict itself. It profoundly shows just how deeply interconnected our world is, often in ways we don't immediately see or think about.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and for the future we're all building? Maybe consider how these seemingly distant events, like a fragile peace deal in Central Africa, are actually tied directly to the materials right there in your pocket, powering tomorrow's AI, enabling advanced defense systems. How do those ties connect to these complex geopolitical struggles across the globe? It really begs the question, doesn't it? What other critical resources might be fueling hidden conflicts, shaping our future in ways we haven't even started to uncover yet?